Good morning and welcome to the Economy and Enterprise Overview and Scrutiny Committee. I'm Councillor Malcolm Clark, representing Delves Lane, Chair of this committee. This is a remote meeting which has been recorded live to the Council's website and will be available to be viewed for a minimum of 6 months. Please be aware that any footage from the meeting can be used in subsequent media broadcasts. I would like to give a warm welcome to members, including the members of the Children and Young People's Overview and Scrutiny Committee who have been invited for Agenda Item 6, officers who are presenting to the committee this morning, and any members of the public or media who are watching the live feed of today's meeting. If I could also remind members that this meeting is being held in the pre-election period, and therefore members will be required to conduct themselves in accordance with the pre-election guidance issued to members by Helen Lynch, our Head of Legal and Democratic Services, in her capacity as Monitoring Officer. Moving on to the agenda, item number 1, apologies for absence. Have we received any apologies, please?
Thank you, Chair. We've got an apology from Councillor Sarah Iveson.
Thank you. Moving to item number 2, substitute members. Do we have notification of any substitute members?
We have no substitutes here today, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Item number 3, minutes of the meetings held on the 23rd of February 2021. Can we agree the minutes as a correct record? We have no dissent indicated, so I will accept those as a true record. Item number 4, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations members would like to make? No declarations made, so we'll move to item number 5, items from co-opted members. Are there any items from our co-optees, please?
None, Chair.
Thank you, Diane. Item number 6, Durham Works Programme, an update, a report of the Corporate Director of Children and Young People's Services. We have Linda Bailey, Strategic Manager, with us this morning to present, supported by Helen Radcliffe. I'd like to welcome both to the meeting, and members, you'll find the report and presentation on pages 25 to 46 of your pack. And I'd now like to invite Linda to give us her presentation, please.
Thank you, Chair. Hopefully you can now see the presentation. I'll just give it one moment. Okay, so what I would like to do in the next sort of 10 to 15 minutes is to provide a brief overview of the Durham Works programme, recognising that most members will be very familiar with Durham Works. I'd like to highlight the impacts of Durham Works through sharing 2 brief videos of young people sharing or describing their experiences whilst on the programme. I'm going to outline some of the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic on the operation of Durham Works before touching upon future funding, current priorities and next steps. So Durham Works, members will be aware, has been operating now since December 2015. It's a £29 million programme funded through the Youth Employment Initiative, European Social Fund, Durham County Council and match funding from partners. And we're aiming to support over 9,000 young people who are unemployed and 16 to 24-year-old into education, employment and training. Our delivery is in local communities across the county, and the programme is due to end in December 2021. Durham Works is very much about individual young people. It puts them at the heart of the programme. We very much target those with additional vulnerabilities, whether that be those with special educational needs, care leavers, those with mental health issues, other young people who face barriers to accessing employment. We and our partners provide one-to-one individualised support. Often over the long term, we can be working with young people for years if necessary. And we provide a range of sort of activities and experiences which seek to develop their confidence, their emotional resilience and their employment related skills. It's really important that we work with employers. We seek to create employment opportunities. We provide work experience opportunities, sector routeways into different areas of work for young people. So it's a range of experiences delivered by ourselves and our partners. And these are just some of our delivery partners we're working with currently. We also have a range of subcontractors that deliver a lot of activity for us. So what I'd like to do now is just to share a video describing the experiences of 10 young people who have been supported throughout Durham Works.
Because Durham Works was backing me, I felt like safe, as if no matter what happened, there was always someone there who was just showing me what I'm capable of and telling me that I'm capable of more than I think that I am.
Well, thanks to Durham Works, I've been able to see new people, to make new friends. I'm very grateful to Durham Works for giving me some of the best advice I've ever gotten.
I personally think that the opportunities that Durham Works can offer people is invaluable. Having little courses that an individual might be able to do within Durham Works can give them that taster. You can really delve into whatever it is, passion you have. It's great.
I come here, met new people, and it was very fun, and it made me want to do more things, courses like this. It just helped me with the confidence of doing interviews and everything like that.
So taking part in the course has been absolutely fantastic. I don't need to wing the interviews anymore. It's just something that makes me want to come back more. Had Durham Works not approached me, I would probably still be just unemployed.
It's more the people. The people are very positive and just gets you out there, gets your social interaction boosted up, your confidence, everything. I've actually got a voice now. They help you boost your own confidence.
They're good at helping people find what they need to do and courses to get you on the right path and get you the first foot in the door for employment. It's crucial that if you're lacking employment, they'll help you no matter what your problems are. They'll be there to talk to you.
Before I was just shy, timid, worked better by myself, but now I've opened up more and became better with teamwork.
Just finished my degree in design. I got a first class for that. I was unemployed for a few months. I didn't have the experience that people wanted and I was quite shy. I think Durham Works is important for people like myself because you don't know what opportunities are out there till you go and find them. Durham Works can help you find those opportunities.
They're very helpful. Give you a lot of opportunity, help you find a job. Because when I started, I was a bit nervous about coming. Then by the end of it, more confident. They really do help you a lot.
Coming down here gives us something to do. It's better than just being sat in the house. Being told about an apprenticeship in the kitchen doing dishes and being a kitchen porter, I've just worked my way up from there. Just little jobs, but it actually means a lot to me. I'm proud of what I've got and what I've achieved.
Okay, so the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on the employment prospects and wellbeing of young people has been well documented. In County Durham, there were 4,290 young people aged 18 to 24 claiming universal credit in January 21. That had increased from 2,865 in January 20. And of course, we work with many more young people on Durham Works who don't claim universal credit. So in terms of Durham Works activity over the last year throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, the vast majority of the support for young people has been delivered virtually. Durham Works advisors have been supporting young people via the telephone, they've been keeping in touch through text, email, they've been using WhatsApp, Zoom, etc. We've had some socially distanced doorstep visits have taken place. there has been some very limited face-to-face activity with some highly vulnerable young people. So our partners now subcontractors have delivered online learning. We've continued to deliver sector routeways in warehousing, construction, ICT, other health and wellbeing sectors. We've used podcasts, blogs, just trying to keep in touch with young people, trying to keep them engaged and keeping them positive. That's been really, really challenging. We've also had to work really closely and with Job Centre Plus and National Career Service and tried to support the government plan for jobs that was launched last July. So we've been delivering intensive youth support on behalf of Job Centre Plus. We've established some virtual youth hubs involving the Job Centre and other partners in the county, which provides more individualised support again for young unemployed people. And we've also become a Kickstart gateway to facilitate the creation of 6 months job opportunities for young people. However, you know, despite our efforts and those of our partners, young people have had significant issues relating to their willingness to engage during lockdown. Their well-being has been badly affected, and we've seen quite a significant decline in terms of the number of young people joining Durham Works. And I think that's illustrated quite clearly in this chart here. So we've got far few people joining us, and that's sort of from the end of 2020, it's been much more difficult to reach out to young people in this operating context. And that's also then had an impact in terms of performance, and I think this is very stark. You can see here the progressions of young people have been impacted with significantly fewer young people entering employment. So as a result of this impact, we have had to submit a project change request to the Department of Work and Pensions to reduce the targets for the programme. We were reluctant to do this as you know, we're wanting to help as many young people as possible. I think we've been reasonably conservative in the revised targets that we've submitted. So now we're aiming to support 9,300 young unemployed people, of which 83% will complete the programme, and of those 74% we're projecting will progress. We've been conservative with this because we wanted to ensure there would be no financial impact on the programme moving forward. You know, to date, members will be aware that we've had a high progression rate into employment of those who have completed, and it's currently standing at 68%. So difficult last year for young people, difficult last year for the operation of the programme, but we have continued to support employers to take on young people. And to date, we've provided 568 wage subsidies. These are grants paid to employers to encourage them to take on a Durham Works young person, and they can pay for up to 50% of the young person's salary costs. These are still available until the end of next month, until the end of April. I think also it's important to just look ahead, isn't it, in terms of Durham Works has been a very significant programme in the county, and it's due to come to an end in December this year, 21. So I thought I would just highlight to members what additional funding we have now in place to support young unemployed people following the end of the main Durham Works programme. We have attracted 10 million further European Social Fund monies to support around 6,000 young people up to the end of 2023. At the moment, this is operating within our schools, so we're supporting young people who are at risk of not progressing post-school, those with particular vulnerabilities in school. We're working with about 900 young people aged 15 to 16 a year and supporting their transition into education following them leaving school. And then after the end of Durham Works main programme, we will also be utilising this funding to operate a programme which will be similar to the main Durham Works programme, but it'll be less intensive in terms of the support we're able to offer due to the reduced level of funding available. We've also been successful in securing 3.6 million European social funding to create a supported employment service in County Durham, which is aiming to support over 900 young people aged 18 and over with significant learning, physical and mental health difficulties between now and December 23. We have also 2 further bids that we're waiting the outcome of, a further £4 million ESF funding again, which we're reasonably positive about. We've also reached the 3rd stage in our application to the Youth Futures Foundation for £4 million worth of funding, which will support a very specific cohort of young people on employment pathways between now and 2025, should we be successful in that activity. So that's what may happen next in terms of the funding. So our current priorities, we're just expecting any day now the next stage of our Durham Works evaluation. Members may recall we shared the full evaluation from Durham Works Stage 1 last year, and we've got the interim report due, as I say, any day, with the final report due November 2021. And this is really important for us as we continue to want to learn at how we can improve the programme to inform future activities. So really our main thrust for the last 9 months of this Durham Works programme is to provide as many employment opportunities as we can in a difficult context. But we have a new employer engagement team in place. We have a marketing campaign ready to go. We're looking at delivering kickstart opportunities, which members will be aware are 6 months paid employment for young people, and developing the youth hubs that I mentioned that are running virtually. We're hoping to open physical youth hubs across the county. So we're very much focusing on employment opportunities, and we've procured or are procuring a range of new employment sector routeways, which will commence from June in a range of sectors, from warehousing to environmental, engineering, care, assembly, all of which have to have identified employers, so specific support to access employment for young people. So I just wanted to finish on Tally, very brief video. Tally recorded this video during lockdown, and I thought it would be a good way to sort of end
My name is Charlton, aka Tally. I am 21 years old. I reached a turning point in November last year where I decided I wanted something different with my life. I wanted a career. I got in touch with Durham Works, with a woman called Anne Wilkinson. She put me in touch with the Raw Digital Academy.
We booked Tally onto our IT Academy, and it's a supercharged package of skills, knowledge and support for young people.
It's quite out of the box for me, so it did help.
She has absolutely flourished, and she shines so bright, and we just couldn't be any more proud of where she is and how she continues to grow.
I am a month into my apprenticeship, but it is one of the best things that has happened to me. Everyone looks after everybody.
She is incredibly intelligent, and she wants nothing but to grow and to do well. She has the hunger, she's passionate, she's incredibly dedicated and committed.
And I really hope that anybody else that feels like they need a nudge in the right direction will get that. Get that nudge, get it and do it.
So thank you. I'll just invite any questions.
Thank you for that presentation, Linda. Obviously, the case studies are great to see, to bring to life the type of work that you do. So thanks for that. I have a question, but because Rosemary was so quick to request to speak, I'm going to invite Rosemary to ask her question first, and then I'll come in after that. Thank you.
Actually, it's 3 questions, but 2. Can you hear all right? 2 of them are very, very short.
Yes.
You referred to the interim evaluation report March 21, and you're saying it's imminent. Would we be able to get copies of that sent? That would be great. My second question is, in paragraph 22 in your paper, you mention a series of employment opportunities, employment areas, admin, retail, sales. The question I would just like to ask is, from that list you've got there, how did you arrive at that list, and are you confident they are the jobs of the future? And my last question is, I note in the end of your paper that you're talking about an employer engagement group. And I think with the whole way that this Durham Works is organised, it underpins how the need to be joined up is really, really strong. And by that, I mean joined up with schools, joined up with employers, going to apprenticeships, and yourselves. You've got an employer engagement group, but do you envisage, have you got in existence a group at the moment that has all those players in, so that the transition to work is much more secure? I'm very encouraged by some of the references in the Durham plan. I think there are well over a dozen, to the need to have a pathway of progression of young people from school with these players, and in particular, it's actually stated the need for impartial careers guidance from an early age, so that they are supported into employment. So that's a much bigger question, but that's it. And I do appreciate how difficult it's been for you in the last year, and I really value what you've done.
Thank you for those questions, Rosemary. I was going to suggest that we request a copy of the Phase 2 interim evaluation report, so I definitely second that. Yeah. So if that could be arranged, Linda, and I'll invite you to respond to the comments, please.
Thank you. Yes, absolutely. We'll absolutely share the evaluation report. In terms of how we arrived at the sort of sector routeways or the employment opportunities you referred to, we have a strategic group. And it sort of touches on your third question as well, really. We have a strategic group which oversees the operation of Durham Works, and that includes a range of partners, including Business Durham and the County Durham Economic Partnership, a range of partners, Job Centre Plus, Careers Service, voluntary sector, others. And really those sectors were determined partly through our work on the sort of COVID-19 response within Durham County Council, but partly informed by members of the strategic group who are out there, many of whom are out there sort of working with businesses in the county. So I think it was twofold, really. The sector routeways, we only pay for those through Durham Works when they're utilised. Therefore, we've got a range of activities. What we're hoping for is we can get as many of those possibly as out and young people can progress. However, if we've got it wrong and there's one or two areas that aren't successful, then we won't progress with them. So I'm hoping that answers part of your question.
I'm thinking in particular of sales and retail, which might not be the most secure avenue to go into in the future. But I was going to come back with one question on that. You've mentioned a range of partners on that group. But you haven't mentioned employers.
Yeah. Well, we don't have employers directly on that group, although, as I say, we do have Business Durham, but we do work with lots of employers. Helen and I both work with the North East Chamber of Commerce as well. We work with the Federation of Small Businesses. We've been doing Teams meets with those throughout lockdown to understand from their perspective what opportunities are out there, and trying to continue to promote Durham Works through their membership. So whilst we don't directly have an employer rep on, we do have a sort of voice of business coming through to us. And we do, of course, I mentioned the sort of almost 600 employers who benefited from the grant. A lot of those we still work with. They come back to us time and time again, which really helps us in terms of understanding demand. And, I can think of one example of a company, Tiny Tots, who I think have come back to us now about 8 times to recruit. So we do have some knowledge directly from employers, from our representative organisations we work with, as well as Business Durham. So I don't say we'll get it perfect, but we do our best. In terms of sales and retail, it's mostly related to online retail that we're looking at. Although we are hopeful that later in the year we still may be able to get some other opportunities out there as well.
Okay.
Thanks, Linda, and thank you, Rosemary, for those questions. I have a question, Linda, please, before we move on to the other members who've registered to speak. Obviously, you've dropped the targets, which is understandable given the times we live in. It's obviously like a regret that we have to do that, but obviously we're realistic in terms of where we are. I guess the aspiration would probably be that we'd like to get that back up to previous numbers. I just wondered when you would review that, and do you sort of obviously share that you'd like to get those numbers back up to where they were before?
Do you know, absolutely. You know, this programme was going so well, and I think as was probably illustrated on the charts, and we want to help as many young people as possible. We have quarterly submissions to the Department of Work and Pensions, and we review our performance against our profile on a monthly basis. I think what we're doing is absolutely whatever we can with the resources we have in terms of engaging young people and supporting them to progress. And I am hopeful that, you know, when things pick up and young people, hopefully we can share with them the opportunities that are available, that we may be more successful in getting more young people on board, especially with things like the Kickstart programme, where we can offer, you know, facilitate those 6 months paid work for young people. We think that might be a good opportunity to get more young people engaged, along with the Youth Hub activity that I mentioned. So yes, we will do. You know, the staff are they've been really frustrated over the last year. It's been really tough for them, I think, in terms of not being able to get out there on the ground, which is what they're used to doing. And I know that they're all desperate to get out there and try and engage as many young people as possible. So we will do our very best, but we can certainly provide regular updates. As I say, we review that on a monthly basis.
Thank you very much, Linda. I think even more important because the project is obviously time limited as well for the future. So thank you for that. Councillor Eddie Adam, please.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Eddie Adam, Aycliffe West Division. Thank you, Linda, for the presentation. Very positive news. Obviously, apart from in terms of performance, but it's absolutely brilliant to see the work that the young people have been doing through this challenging period, as you've already indicated. So thinking about that challenging period and the performance of the programme, what impact has the lack of, well, I'm assuming there's been a lack of IT resources, issues with broadband, skills and knowledge of the young people to be able to actually use the facility from a distance learning point of view. So has that lack had any impact on the performance? If it has had an impact on the performance, then how are we as an organisation going to improve that situation? Is there resources available in terms of looking forward for these young people? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Adam. So to respond to that question, it has been incredibly difficult in terms of digital access for some of our young people. Fortunately, through Durham Works, we are able to buy Chromebooks with appropriate safeguards on them, and we have been delivering those to young people across the county. It hasn't gone perfectly. There has been delays in us being able to purchase those Chromebooks for young people, but they are flowing out and have been. So we will be able to continue where necessary to provide that access. We also provide dongles for those who haven't got broadband at home, so they can access, you know, the Wi-Fi. They can engage in some of our online delivery. They can do their job search. So it's not been ideal. It's something we're still doing. I think we've still got about 80 laptops on order at the moment. But, you know, I think, again, everybody's just trying to do what they can do to get those resources out there to young people. And it's certainly picked up in the last sort of 3 or 4 months.
Thank you very much for that, Linda. Councillor Ivan Jewell, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Linda. Councillor Ivan Jewell, County Councillor for the Burnopfield and Dipton Division. Linda, I know that we've all been going through a very, very difficult time, and but at the same time, I'd like to sort of some assurance that we have still continued to maximise progress and measure that progress towards appropriate targets. So firstly, can you assure me that that has been happening? And secondly, can I move on to the long-term monitoring? I know things have moved on an awful lot, but quite often programs like this have been seen as a stopgap. And what I would like to think is that what we're doing is we're looking and we're seeing that the young people involved are securing long-term employment. I noticed within your presentation you talked about the major focus on employment outcomes during final months of programme. I think I'm looking at it more long term than that. Do we measure that, and are we successful in that? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so in terms of your first question, what are we doing to maximise, ensure that we're continuing to measure performance and challenge performance? We have a monthly performance group within Durham Works where we look at area-based targets, we look at individual team targets, we look at individual advisor targets, and we review progress against those. We review progress in terms of interventions our advisors have had with young people and measure those. We've got a team of contract officers who work to ensure our subcontractors and delivery partners are doing everything they can to perform against our expectations on the programme. So I do think we've got quite a rigorous performance management system in place. We've refined that and enhanced that throughout the operation of Durham Works. In terms of long-term monitoring, I think that's a really important point. We try very hard to keep in touch with our young people, even when they've progressed into employment or they've gone to university or into a long-term education programme. However, it isn't always possible. But for those young people we're able to keep into contact with, we do track them. So I can give you one example. During the first phase of Durham Works, in terms of the grant recipients, so these were young people supported through the Durham Works grants, we were able to track a quite considerable number of those, not all of those, but those we were able to track, we had 73% of those were still in employment after a year after the grant had ended. Now, considering that young people often, their employment can often be short term, that was considered to be a good performance. I would also say that this programme's been subject to national evaluation by the Department of Work and Pensions. Unfortunately, they haven't published that national evaluation yet, but we have seen a number of the slides at an event we had with DWP last year, and it indicates that the Youth Employment Initiative programmes have got higher sustained employment outputs than any other ESF funded programme. Now that's for the YEI programmes across the country, not just ourselves, but I think we have some evidence to suggest that we do have a reasonably high sustained rate. But what I couldn't say is that we are able to keep in touch and track all of our young people, because sometimes when they get a job, they're just delighted to have done so and they disengage from us. But where we can track, we do. So I hope that answers your question.
Thanks very much, Linda. Thank you.
The next councillor registered to speak is Councillor Joyce Charlton, please.
Yes, thanks very much, Linda. It's a very interesting presentation. Really, my question is similar to Councillor Jewell's in the sustainability of these grant-funded jobs, because let's face it, we all know that when we have these kind of programmes where employers are being paid to take on these young people, when that money runs out, they're quite happy to say bye-bye and then go on to another one and get the money for that and go on to another one. And it's demoralising for the young people if they have engaged with those employers to be sent on their way. And it does have a mental health issue for some of the young people. But at the end of a lot of these jobs and people who you're engaging with, it's like Rosemary said, you know, retail jobs tend to be part-time. There's very few full-time jobs within retail. So really my question is, how many of these employers are just using our young people for cheap labour? And, you know, at the end of it, if there is a job for them, is it full-time generally, or is it part-time?
Okay, thank you. Yes, so I actually do share your concerns around sustainability, Councillor Charlton, and that was a concern that I had early with this grant. So I suppose what we've done is we've tried to put measures in place whereby an employer who was going to take on a young person anyway couldn't just access the grant to, you know, just for the funding. What we do is we try very much to take it from the perspective of a young person. So an employer comes to us with an opportunity, or one of our employer engagement team identifies an opportunity. We then look to work with the employer to identify a Durham Works participant, and where possible, we'll look to identify somebody who we think would be particularly suited and particularly needs that opportunity. That doesn't get away from your point in terms of what happens after the grant ends, and can they then just finish that young person? And yes, they can. To be absolutely honest, they can do that, and there's nothing we can do to stop that. However, you know, I shared some data we had in terms of those young people who were able to sustain their employment with that employer after 12 months, so that's 6 months after the grant had ended. I don't think it's ever going to be, you know, we're never going to be in a position where we can absolutely hand on heart say it'll only be used for a certain period and then that employment will stop. But I think we've got some evidence to suggest there is sustained employment for quite a high number of our young people. I think it'd be interesting to look at the evaluation, because I wanted our evaluators to challenge again on that point, and that was one of the things I asked them to consider, was the additionality that the grant was bringing in terms of employment prospects for our young people. So we may glean, you know, sort of further insight from that.
Okay, but on the actual, if the vast majority of our young people are kept on with these employers, is it generally full-time employment or part-time employment?
Yeah, it's full-time. It's usually 30 hours or more. But I would be very happy to have a look to see what data we could provide you with in terms of those hours. We won't have it for all of them, but we should have it for a you know, significant number if you'd like to see that.
That would be lovely. Thank you so much, Linda. Thank you. And thanks, Chief.
Jim Atkinson, your comment or question, please?
Yeah, Chair, just happy to move on. The last two answers answered my question. Thank you.
That's great, Jim. Thank you very much indeed. Right, everyone, that I have nobody else registered to speak, so final opportunity if anyone would like to comment or ask any questions. Right, well, therefore, can I thank Linda and Helen for coming to our meeting and presenting this morning. The recommendations are on page 26, that we note and comment upon the information provided, and that the Economy and Enterprise OSC includes a further progress report of the Durham Works programme in the 21-22 work programme. Also, as per an early suggestion, we would like to receive a copy of the Phase 2 evaluation report, and a further progress report is scheduled in the work programme for December prior to the programme ending, and that the progress report includes the key findings from the final Phase 2 evaluation report. Thank you, members. Item 7 is the EU funding update. We have Claire Williams, Funding and Programmes Manager, with us this morning, supported by Heather Orton. In the report, the report is on pages 47 to 64 of the pack. And I'll now hand over to Claire for her presentation, please.
Hi, yes, I'm Claire Williams, the Funding and Programmes Manager at Durham County Council, and I'll run through the report providing an update on EU funding within the county, the current position, but also as we near the end of the programme period, look at what replacement funding may be being put in place. As you know from previous updates, European funding has provided a significant investment into the county, providing support for its economy, supporting businesses, innovation, low carbon measures and increasing skills and improving employability. As Durham is recognised as a transition region in this programme period, it has its own ring-fenced allocation of structural funds. In this programme period, that's £155 million, and this is made up of 86 million from ERDF and £69 million from ESF. Durham's also benefited from 2 leader programmes that's funded through the EU's Rural Development Programme. These have now closed after being fully committing its allocation of 4 million, and Durham will also have benefited from a share of the region's rural growth programme of 105 million. So following the referendum in June 2016, the government guaranteed funding for the existing EU programmes. This meant, in effect, a business as usual position, and we've continued to work with partners to develop project applications and, where possible, extend provision of existing projects in order to maximise the funding before it ends in 2023. As you'll see from the tables in the report showing the current spend position, you'll see that a significant amount of work has been undertaken to commit this. In terms of ERDF, nearly £76 million is committed to projects, and across most of the investment priorities, spend is almost fully committed. This includes £18.5 million to deliver innovation and research development projects, and over 42 million supporting the competitiveness of our local businesses. There is an underspend in the low carbon theme, and this is where we've seen attrition in the application phase of projects. Overall, there is a balance of just over £10.5 million. The position with any residual funds is that they're pooled nationally into a reserve fund, and the kind of focus of that pot of money has now been put towards the response to COVID-19, and we've seen new calls put out through ERDF that support things like the visitor economy and reopening of high streets, and the County Council has received an allocation of just under £500,000, providing 100% funding to support high streets and other public places reopen safely. Any residual funds are expected to continue to be put out through commissioning, focusing on the economic recovery from the pandemic. And I'm not sure if anybody saw at the weekend, there was a new announcement of a new Welcome Back Fund, which will help councils boost tourism and improve green spaces in light of the reopening, and we're expecting details on that soon. I should add that the figures through the National Reserve Fund are not included within the table you have in the report. In terms of ESF, against the allocation of £63 million, we've currently contracted 50 million, and this includes projects that have received their grant offer letter or opt-in activity that's been approved. But we've got a further just short of £20 million in commitments, securing additional funding. And as Linda has previously outlined in a presentation on Durham Works, she's managed to secure additional funding for her scheme, which actually means that if we take all of the commitments into account, we're delivering around £70 million of ESF activity to support employment and skills. And Linda also mentioned that there's been a recent call for youth employment initiatives put out, and last Thursday we submitted a bid for a further £3 million to extend the Durham Works scheme. So in Durham we don't have any residual ESF. We've actually obviously overcommitted, but at a national level, any remaining funds will be pooled and distributed through a national level, again focusing on the recovery from COVID. And we're expecting calls in spring, so it might be that Durham has a further opportunity to benefit from ESF and maximise that opportunity. Durham County Council in particular has kind of responded to the opportunity of EU funding and is the applicant for a significant number of projects. I've listed these in Appendix 2 for your information. We're currently delivering 21 projects that are worth a total of 71.3 million. If the new project from Linda is to be successful, obviously that will increase that. Well, that has a total project cost of £119 million. And also for your information, in Appendix 3 is a list of all the other ERDF projects that are being delivered within the county, regardless of who the applicant is. So looking ahead, given the benefits to the county of EU funding, it's vital that we secure replacement funding. The government has announced that it intends to replace EU structural funds with a new UK-wide shared prosperity fund. So far, details on the operation of this are quite limited, but we did have the kind of key heads of terms released as part of the spending review in 2020. And what we know from this is that the government intends to use shared prosperity fund to target those areas most in need, such as deprived towns or rural coastal communities, and it'll be split into two parts. So the first will be a employment and skills programme to improve employment for those out of work, and the other will be place-based, targeting those areas of need, and will provide investment to people, place and business. The government has committed that the total amount of funding across the whole of the UK will at least match what we currently get through EU receipts, although we haven't had details of how this will be allocated. We expect, government said that they would publish an investment framework in spring 2021. I think that's probably going to be the summer now. And the amount, the kind of quantum of funding will be announced in the spending review around September of this year. Had we stayed in the EU, recent research does show that County Durham, and this is on the basis, the relative levels of its GDP, would have been classed as a less developed region, and this potentially would have meant more money for the county. So based on the amount per capita that current less developed regions get, it's estimated Durham could have more than doubled what it currently gets to at least £300 million, €3 million in the next programme. Therefore, it's key that under the new UK Shared Prosperity Fund, we continue to have a protected allocation of funding which at least matches what it would have received under the next EU programme period. And it's also really important that this funding is in addition to existing national regeneration funding rather than a replacement for it. We also want to ensure that the allocation is based on need rather than through a competitive process, and that ideally it's less bureaucratic, and we want kind of local control of it so that the decisions around what is funding is held at a local level as close to its citizens as possible. In the interim, before the UK Shared Prosperity Fund is rolled out in 2022, the government has recently launched a UK Community Renewal Fund. Details of this was provided in the budget, and it will provide for the whole of the UK £120 million to spend in 2021-22. The aim is to help us kind of transition and move away from EU funding and help to prepare for the rollout of the Shared Prosperity Fund by piloting new approaches and new programmes. 100 local authority areas have been prioritised for the funding. This is according to a new index of economic resilience, and Durham is one of these 100 areas. This doesn't mean a guarantee of funding or an indication of how much, but it will be taken into account as part of the assessment criteria. And bids of up to £3 million can be submitted. That's under 4 key themes around investment in skills, in local businesses, communities and place, and then supporting people back into employment. A lead body for each area has been identified, and for Durham this is the County Council, and that lead body is responsible for inviting applications forward. That's through an open bidding process to encourage all stakeholders to apply, and the lead body then has to appraise and prioritise applications and submit a short list of those to government by the deadline of the 18th of June. Government will announce successful projects we anticipate from late July onwards. In the recent budget, the Chancellor also announced details of a new Levelling Up Fund. So this isn't kind of connected to the replacement of EU funding, but it's a significant amount of money. It's up to £4 billion for England. A proposal can be submitted up to the total of £20 million, or exceptionally £50 million for transport schemes. And this could be for one project or for a package of up to 3 projects. A lead authority has been identified for each area, and it can submit one proposal in total from each of the parliamentary constituencies that fall within that area. So for Durham that would be 6. The deadline for the first round is the 18th of June, and priority in this round will be given to spend that can be delivered on the ground in the financial year 2021-22. There will be future opportunities to bid in subsequent rounds for delivery up to March 2024, and there's 3 main priority areas for funding, with investment in transport, in regeneration and town centres, and in cultural and heritage assets. It'll be important how we look at how these proposals come forward for this fund, how we can kind of look coherently for the whole county, and how we engage and support stakeholders in the process. And attached in Appendix 4 is a summary of the criteria for both the Levelling Up Fund and Community Renewal Fund, which just provides a bit more information. And that's the end of the report.
Thank you very much for your presentation, Claire. I'm going to open it up to members' questions, but I do need, I think, especially with the subject matter here, remind members that we are in a pre-election period, and any discussion on the content of the report that could be deemed political cannot take place. Now, I appreciate that is restrictive, and it's an unfortunate reflection on the legal period that we're now in. But obviously questions are still fine, but you need to be careful about what those questions are, please. I know it's not ideal, but that's where we are. Can I invite Councillor Rob Crew to speak, please?
Thank you, Chair. Rob Crew, County Councillor for the Blackhall Ward, and also the Chair of the Corporate Overview and Scrutiny Management Board. And it's to express a couple of concerns, and thanks, Claire, by the way, for your presentation. You've hit on 2 points that I think we need to have more information on. We look forward to seeing the investment framework being established soon, because I think it's not only important to ensure that we have at least as much as we've had, we need to ensure that we have at least as much as we would have had we not left the European Union. As you correctly say, we would have had perhaps twice as much as we would have done had we not left the EU, and I think we need to make sure that we get that level of funding that we so badly need. And while the quantum of funding is important, I think it's equally important that we get the governance arrangements right as well. And I have a couple of concerns about this. Firstly, because we don't seem to be getting any light shed on the subject. And I do get a little bit concerned about developments early this week, where the government announced the demise of the Industrial Strategy Council. And I'm concerned it could apply that framework to the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, because along with centralisation of funding through the Treasury, if they take those governance arrangements away from local areas, I think we could have serious concerns regardless of the amount of funding we receive. I hope those questions aren't seen as political, Chair. You're correct, we need to avoid those points, but I think it's avoiding party politics rather than politics in the round. And I don't know when we're going to get any more information on the governance arrangements for the Shared Prosperity Fund. I do look forward to seeing the investment framework, which I understand has been delayed from this spring to summer this year. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Rob. Claire, would you like to comment on those?
Well, just that I agreed in terms of the importance of having the, not just the amount of money that we would have received, but also the governance arrangements are really important, and in terms of where the decision making's held, but also the benefit that a ring-fenced allocation for Durham has provided through this current EU programme. What the ring-fenced allocation has meant is that deliverers have to take account of the local needs and the differences within Durham, which we haven't had previously. So when providers deliver within Durham, and whether that's cross-boundary activity, they need to take account of the local circumstances. So what we do want to ensure going forward is that ideally there's a recognition of that within the rollout of the Shared Prosperity Fund, and that what we get is a sort of decision-making process where local control of that is the best way forward. We expect further details to be included within the investment framework on the kind of delivery arrangements, and so hopefully we'll get more information in the summer.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks for that, Claire.
Thank you. Rosemary Morris, please.
Thanks, Chair. It really might have been partly answered, but in these uncertain times, I know in paragraph 23, which you've been talking about, you expand on what we would have had and hoping it continues. Do you have a plan B if it doesn't?
In terms of if we don't get that amount of funding? Yeah. There is I suppose in terms of just thinking in terms of where we are looking at the economy and how it's been impacted by COVID, there is work to look at developing a new economic strategy for the county. So that will set out the sort of framework and the priorities that we want to fund, and then it will be looking at where the different investment may come from. Not just through Shared Prosperity Fund, but through other investments that can align then to the delivery of that economic strategy.
Yeah, thanks for that. I would be thinking along the lines of climate change, climate mitigation. There are loads of economic opportunities in that, which would help employ people.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for those comments, Rosemary, and for the answer, Claire. We have Jim Atkinson, please.
Thanks very much, Claire. I didn't introduce myself. My name's Jim Atkinson from Aycliffe East. It's just that the new levelling up fund, £4 billion for England. When you said England, I was thinking UK. I mean, what's the score for the others?
It's 4.8 for the whole of the UK and 4 billion for England.
Answers that one. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Jim. I've got no other members indicating the wish to speak. You're open to do so now for a final time if you'd like to ask any questions. Can I thank Claire for your presentation this morning. Members, the recommendations are on page 48. I'll be happy to recommend that we agree to those on the basis that the future detail of these things are certainly quite a political issue, and obviously the principles of what we sort of acknowledging today that we would like, and that's something that's consistent with what the county said before. So if you're happy with those, we can move on to agenda item 8. All right, agenda item 8 is the Q3 forecast of revenue and capital outturn report 2020 to 2021. We welcome Ian Herbison, our finance manager, and who's supported by Paul Rain, principal accountant. The report is on pages 65 to 84 of the pack, and I'll pass over to Ian for your presentation, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this is the Q3 position that updates the forecast at Q2 that we considered at the last meeting that we had on the 23rd of February. It's now shown that revenue was forecasting an underspend of 1.76 million against a revised budget of 55 million. Capital now has a revised budget of 69.2 million, and spend to December was 42.097 million against the profile budget, which is the expected spend, of 43.736. So the actual spend was just marginally below the expected spend. The COVID pandemic is still having, as I said last time, a significant impact in the regeneration service, and additional costs and lost income due to the pandemic continue to impact on the service, and arriving at the cash limit underspend, 17 million of COVID-related additional costs and lost income has been taken into account, which has been offset by 6 million of COVID-related savings, which arrive from having facilities shut, i.e. the leisure centres, and they've been excluded from the forecasts. And the reason for that is that the COVID-related pressure is being treated corporately and offset by government funding as far as being possible. It is worth saying that there's more detail of the corporate treatment of the COVID pandemic, which was in the Cabinet report, and that was considered on the 17th of March in the report entitled Forecast of Revenue and Capital Outturn for the period to December. The tables under paragraph 12 provide a detailed breakdown of the cash limit position for, by type of expenditure and by head of service. What there's a lot of detail in the report about the detailed variances for each head of service, and they can be found in Appendix 2, which starts on page 74. So that's useful reference. And there's more details that we've provided in paragraphs 14 and 15. Due to the significant impact of COVID, we've actually detailed the main issues there. And Appendix 3 has the detail of the capital expenditure. So I'm happy to take any questions on anything detailed in the report, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. Absolute ton of detail in the finance report, so thank you for being able to summarise it so effectively. You could have been on for hours, I'm sure. Would any member like to comment or ask any questions in relation to the report? I don't have anyone currently requested to speak, but you're open to do so. Councillor Eddie Adam.
Thanks, Chair. Just a very brief question in terms of page 74, where it talks about an overspend of 342,000 at the Derwent side, culture and sport. So just a further explanation in relation to that. If that service has not been operating, why have we got an overspend in that particular area? Thanks, Chair.
Yes, thank you. Yes, that was a service we took on a couple of years ago, and when we brought the service in-house, what we'd found out that we weren't able to deliver the service as was intended. So what we did was we've been trying to streamline as best as possible. But that issue won't be going forward because we did secure some additional funding through the medium-term financial plan. So in 21-22, it was recognised that as we brought the service in-house to continue the service delivery, the additional costs that we were incurring have been taken into account. So going forward, this won't be an issue, but it is something that we've had to find other savings within the service to make sure that the service was able to break even. But it certainly provided a challenge to the service, and it did require a lot of monitoring during the year. But that is now being rectified going forward in the latest round of the MTFP.
Thank you, Ian, and thank you, Eddie, for that question. I don't have any other member wanting to speak at the moment. Okay, with that, we will thank Ian for attending this morning, and obviously for Paul as well. The recommendations on page 66 that we note the contents of the report. So moving on to agenda item 9, it's the Q3 performance report, and we welcome our strategy team leader, Gemma Wilkinson, supported by Tom Gorman, corporate scrutiny and strategy manager. The report is on pages 85 to 106 of the pack, and I'll hand straight over to Gemma for her presentation.
Thank you very much, Chair. As you've just introduced, I'm Gemma Wilkinson, the strategy team leader. This is your quarterly performance report for Q3 of the current year, being the period up to December 2020, and this covers the services and areas falling under the remit of this committee. With the reporting period in mind, performance needs to be considered against the backdrop of the coronavirus pandemic and the emergency response that the Council and partners have been delivering since March. Our performance report is structured against the 4 ambitions of the Council vision for County Durham and the Council plan. For the purposes of this committee, the focus is on the more and better jobs and connected communities ambitions. The report provides details of employment levels and take-up of the various government support schemes. As members will see in the report, at September 2020, the employment rate stood at 71.6%, remaining relatively static in comparison to the previous period. Due to the government support packages that are in place, we're really yet to see any significant impact of the pandemic on the employment rate. Similarly, the claimant count remains static in December at 6.1%, following an initial increase seen at the start of the pandemic. This is reflective of the trends seen regionally and nationally. In December, 11% of eligible employments were furloughed, which equated to 22,600 jobs. This compares to 15% in July 2020, and the latest data for January shows that the most current rate stands at 13%, an increase of approximately 6,000 employments. This is likely to increase further with the most recent lockdown, and we'll update members as part of future performance reports. As Linda has alluded to in relation to the Durham Works programme, we have seen some impact in terms of our employability programmes on COVID, from COVID, in terms of their delivery. There's still some reluctancy to engage due to concerns about the pandemic. Diminishing job opportunities are impacting on people's motivations to actively look for employment, and Job Centre Plus are currently not mandating participants to engage. However, there has been some successes in these programmes during the quarter, particularly in relation to participants becoming self-employed or moving into job sectors that are experiencing increased demands, such as food retail and delivery drivers. Moving on to the question whether County Durham is a good place to do business, the report contains details of the amount of grant paid in relation to the government's business grant schemes, which shows that 100% of the grant has been allocated. Additionally, the report details the £5 million Durham Business Recovery Grant, which we have established, and this is anticipated to support over 800 businesses and safeguard more than 1,700 jobs. Footfall within Durham City continues to be significantly below average levels seen for the period, with the impact being seen equally across daytime and nighttime economy. Delivery of programmes to support business improvements also continues to be impacted by the COVID restrictions, with our staff being unable to undertake site visits or clients being unable to secure tradesmen or confirm dates for works. Positively this quarter, we have secured almost 20 million from the Future High Streets Fund to improve the leisure, transport and hospitality offer in Bishop Auckland, and work has commenced to transform Festival Walk in Spennymoor. In relation to tourism and cultural events, although the national restrictions were lifted during the summer months, the pandemic continues to have an impact on the tourism sector. The latest results from the Visit County Durham COVID Impact Survey showed that 60% of respondents were currently experiencing a drop in income of 50% or more, and 79% felt their business had been significantly affected. Additionally, a number of core attractions within the county didn't reopen due to the social distancing requirements still in place, and those that did reopen did so with reduced capacity for the same reason. In terms of our own cultural offer, although our theatres remain closed as social distancing makes it impossible to operate safely, we have continued our online offer during Q3 with events such as audio plays and pre-filmed pantomimes. Moving on to the ambition of connected communities and the question of whether residents have access to decent and affordable housing, the report notes that continued impact of COVID in respect of the eviction ban and the knock-on effect of this on available move-on accommodation. This has led to a reduction in the number of households where it was possible to prevent homelessness and has increased the length of time households spend in temporary accommodation. Work has been undertaken by Housing Solutions to assess the accommodation needs, and work is currently underway to prioritise single-person accommodation through the County Durham Lettings Agency. Few properties have also been brought back into use this quarter, which is a direct result of the COVID restrictions at the time. This has affected the ability to undertake work where it was required to properties. Finally, in relation to the question of how easy it is to travel around the county, the report notes that our highways maintenance backlog is now broadly in line with other local authorities. However, issues remain with unclassified roads due to the severe winter of 17-18, which resulted in a deterioration in condition to levels worse than the national average. And that concludes the report, Chair, and I'll welcome any questions.
Thank you, Gemma. I appreciate you attending and giving that presentation this morning. Does any member have any comments or questions that they'd like to raise with Gemma, please? Bring in Councillor Rob Crute.
Thanks, Chair. Just a quick one for Gemma. She mentioned there about the impact of COVID-19 on tourism and the impact that's had on the local economy. When will we see that feeding through in the performance indicators? You know, the tables at the end of the report, because we're looking at greens on that table, but we're looking at a time lag. We've got figures there from 2019 comparing them to the year before. When will we get the full picture of the impact of COVID-19 on tourism and its contribution to the county economy? Because as we know from the impact of COVID, it's hit the retail, the culture, the hospitality industry particularly hard, and that's sure to feed through on those figures. So how far does that time lag have an impact, and when will we see more updated figures, Gemma?
Thank you. So those indicators that you're referring to are annual indicators, and they do have a 12-month lag. But I do know that in respect of the most recent data that we've received, that Visit County Durham are also working to do some estimates in terms of looking at the impact of COVID on those. And I think we have provided those as part of a previous performance report, so I can get those recirculated. But additionally as well, I can speak to Visit County Durham in terms of their latest estimates on those in respect of the COVID impact.
Thanks, Gemma, and thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Rob. Councillor Mark Wilkes, please.
Good morning, Chair. Councillor Mark Wilkes, Framwellgate and Newton Hall Division. I'm just wondering if I can just ask in relation to the temporary accommodation and the amount of time taken to get people into from temporary accommodation into something more permanent. And I think we'd all had this perception that maybe there was a lot more people being able to stay in their homes because of the things that the government had done to kind of restrict people losing their tenancies. But then, of course, there's people who have to leave the house for other reasons. And I'm just wondering whether those figures, where it's showing pretty much a doubling over the last year and a half in how long it takes, whether that's heading back in the right direction now, or whether in actual fact it's going to show up worse when we see the next quarter figures for Q4. And what we've actually been doing as a council to try and fix that problem, because 30 days in temporary accommodation, and if it's gone higher, is a very long time and has a whole raft of knock-on impacts, particularly where you've got children in that environment. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Yeah, so as I mentioned within the report, obviously the impact of COVID in terms of the eviction ban and the other restrictions has prevented a sort of or has reduced the availability of move-on accommodation that has led to those lengthening in that temporary accommodation. We are certainly working still with those families and working with landlords as well as part of an initiative to try and prevent people being evicted and therefore having to move into temporary accommodation where that's required. I know certainly the Housing Solutions Services I mentioned are working to look at increasing the amount of available accommodation through the County Durham letting scheme. The impact of the housing of rough sleepers during the pandemic has also had an impact in terms of the number of people within temporary accommodation, and therefore the number of people that we're able to provide or need to find move-on accommodation for. But I can certainly speak to Housing Solutions to get the most up-to-date figures and get those provided to the committee.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Thanks to Mark for that question. I don't have anybody else registered to speak on this item, but you have one final opportunity to do so if you wish. All right, thank you, members. That concludes item number 9. So the recommendation is on page 88, that we consider the overall position and direction of travel in relation to Q2 performance, the impact of COVID-19 on performance, and the actions taken to address areas of underperformance, including the significant economic and wellbeing challenges because of the pandemic. Moving to item number 10, which is the refresh of the work programme for 21-22. And I'd like to invite Diane Close, our Overview and Scrutiny Officer, to go over this item, please.
Thank you, Chair. As members are aware, refreshing the committee's work programme is a two-stage process, with the report before members this morning the first stage of that process. The report highlights to members that the refresh reflects the objectives, associated outcomes and actions identified within the Council Plan, which is appended to the report as Appendix 2 and is set in the context of the County Durham Vision, other key strategic documents and government legislation which is relevant to the remit of this particular Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Members will be aware that in 2020-21, as a result of the pandemic, the work programme was delivered very differently, with agenda items prioritised to come to formal meetings, and the remainder of the work programme was dealt with via briefing reports, which were circulated to members outside of the meeting. In addition, during meetings of the committee held in 2020-21, members have identified a number of further updates which they would want to come to committee as part of their future work programme going forward, and I would refer members to paragraphs 10 to 12, pages 109 to 111 of the report, with many of those areas identified in these paragraphs proposed to go forward into the future work programme. Also, during meetings of the committee held in 2020 and in 21, members have highlighted additional areas of concern which they may want to consider for inclusion in the future work programme. Those areas include skills development and employability for young people, the pipeline of investment coming into the county, and of course the need for the committee to continue to monitor the impact of the pandemic on the services provided within the regeneration, economy and growth service grouping. I would also like to highlight, Chair, at this point that there are a number of uncertainties going forward, as we do not know the number of meetings we will be allocated yet or how those meetings will be conducted. I would also like to highlight, Chair, that it is intended that a further work programme report will go to the first meeting of the Economy and Enterprise Overview and Scrutiny Committee following the election in May. Continuing, Chair, finally, I would just like to conclude by inviting members of the committee to suggest any additional areas of activity for inclusion in the future work programme and an area for focused scrutiny review. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Diane. And members, you'll be aware, obviously, that the massive uncertainty. We don't know if and when it's going to be going back to meetings in person. We don't know how many. Everything's sort of up in the air, but I initially was a bit confused as to why this would come to this meeting as being the last meeting of the committee in the current form, but quite rightly that, you know, it's starting to get planned now, so it's important to give members a chance to speak on it. So if anyone would like to do so, please indicate in the chat. And I have Councillor Rob Crute, please.
Thanks, Chair. You pretty much said what I was about to say in terms of exercise and caution. Diane's dead right, of course. We don't know where we're going to be after May in terms of the amount of meetings that we might have. We don't know where we'll be in terms of COVID restrictions, whether we'll be meeting indoors. I suspect we will be, because the regulations on remote meetings are due to expire at the end of spring. So, you know, we don't really know where we're going to be. I think it's helpful to have this item on the agenda at the moment, because we can put a marker down for the future committee. Clearly, the next committee that will take over in May, we don't know the composition of that committee because it'll be after the elections. So this will come back. It may be that members choose to dip the toes into a review programme, but I think it's worth looking at the proposed work programme we have here. It's quite full. We do have a lot to deal with, and I think today's meetings raised quite a few issues that will warrant further consideration. But I think the word at the moment has to be caution. Let's wait and see what we're going to be like after May. Thanks, Chair.
Yeah, I think for the purpose of just recording it, it's not that we're being presumptuous that we might come back or whatever. It's just a case of giving the benefit of our experience of what we've learned. Can I invite Councillor Mark Wilkes to speak?
Yeah, Chair, I think Rob's kind of took my thunder there on this one because, I agree, and I think it's realistic because we all know within every political party that there are people stepping down as well, and there'll be independents stepping down as well, and there's going to be different people. We might find that half the councillors are different after the election, and they will all have their own views on what the priorities should be that we're looking at. So I think it's key that we don't try and tie things to a particular avenue, and that we have that opportunity, assuming that those of us who come back, if we do come back, can filter in what we feel that priority is based on those people, but also on the environment that we're in at that time. So I'd support what Rob says, but I think it's really key that we make sure that at the earliest meeting possible, that new members get the opportunity to feed in to what that work programme is going to be. Thanks.
Yeah, I completely agree with all of that, Mark. For me, it was important not to kind of be presumptuous and say, look, this is what you're going to be doing. Every committee would, review it anyway. I think it's only right you would do that early doors. So I'm sort of comfortable that we're just like saying this is, as a guidance, this is what we've done. You may want to do something else. That's for a future meeting. Would anybody else like to make any comments or ask any questions to Diane about anything in the report? Great. Well, thank you very much, members. I'll just pull up my recommendations. Just recommendations on page 107 that we note the proposed work programme, and that's copied at Appendix 2, and we note a further report detailing the work programme will be submitted at the first meeting, so that is going to be covered. Right, thank you, members. Item number 11, any other business. I've not been informed of any other business. However, members will be aware that this is the final Economy and Enterprise meeting before the election. I would like to thank each and every one of you, members of the committee, both councillors and of course our co-optees, for your attendance and participation over the previous 2 years that I've sat as chairman. I'd like to thank Councillor Richard Manchester, who's been a very effective vice chairman, always on hand to discuss things over the telephone, and one day, hopefully soon, in person. I'd also like to give thanks to Councillor Alison Beattie, who chaired the committee for the first 2 years of this electoral term, and Councillor Rob Crute, who I've often sought out with questions. He's always been available to share his knowledge and experience. I wish each member well for the future, in particular those members who are not standing on May the 6th. I'd like to thank Diane Close, our Scrutiny Officer, who, as you all know, works incredibly hard behind the scenes to coordinate the operations of this committee, and to Stephen Gwillam, as Chief Scrutiny Officer, for his input and support as well. There are too many officers to thank individually, but I'm sure I speak on behalf of everyone that we're very grateful for all the presentations they've made to our committee to inform our debates and give us the opportunity to comment. We also should thank our IT officers and committee clerks for their support, particularly since we moved to virtual meetings, and to the external partners who've engaged with us as a committee and members of the press and public who've watched our meetings. Mark, did you make a request to speak before I close?
It was simply to say on behalf of our group chair to thank you. You've been a good chair, as was the previous chair, and allowed us to get our points across. There have been occasions in the past where there have been chairs that I wasn't too au fait with, but in the case of yourself and the previous chair, I'd just like to say thank you, and thank you to all the officers as well.
Appreciate that, Mark, and obviously thank you as well for your participation as well. That concludes the meeting, everyone, so please can you remain on mute, stay seated until the broadcast ends, and with my best wishes, that concludes today's meeting.